Hello, and welcome to Street Aesthete. This is the show where we explore street view coverage of a noteworthy location, looking out for beautiful architecture and stunning scenery, while I amuse myself by remarking on what we see. And today we are going to be visiting Western Russia, the country's second most populous city, sometimes known as the Venice of the North, and Russia's cultural capital. It is St. Petersburg. And without further ado, I think we're just going to drop straight in to the Moscow railway station here and see what we find. It's difficult to know where to begin, so I suppose we'll just begin with some facts. This is Ploshad Vstania, Uprising Square. Yes, I know a little bit of Russian. And over here we have the Moskovsky Vokzal, which is the Moscow station. A little bit of interesting information for you about the word Vokzal, which is the word for station. It comes from the name of a place in London that you may have heard of, Vauxhall. The story goes something like this, that there was an Englishman, a theatre organiser, who came to St. Petersburg and named the gardens that stood somewhere in this city, Vauxhall Gardens, after the gardens of the same name in London. And the train station that was built there was subsequently named after it, Vauxhall, the Russified version of the name. And there's an interesting sort of synergy going on with this word, in that zal, the second part of the word, is also the word for a hall in Russian. And so it came to be that all train stations were named after this place, Vauxhall. And over here we can see Gorod-Geroi Leningrad, an interesting bit of the city's history. So this is Hero City, Leningrad. Formerly, of course, St. Petersburg was known as Leningrad. After the death of Vladimir Lenin, the name of the city was changed in his honour, and it was known as a hero city because of the resistance it put up against the siege that it was under during the Second World War. And we really have got a great wealth of incredible architecture here to enjoy. And I want to make it very clear from the start of this video that I'm well aware that there is a conflict between the nation of Russia and Ukraine. I'm not here to comment on that. I'm not here to talk about politics, about war, about morality, the rights and wrongs of this, that, or the other. I'm simply here to admire the architecture of the place. And there certainly is a lot to admire. I've actually started off going in the opposite direction to the one I wanted to go in. Really, the bulk of the city is over to the west of where we've started, but I think it was worth taking a small detour down this street, partly to give myself time to explain the premise of this video and to explain what it is not about, but also to give you a sense of the way that in every direction we go in this city, there is a great cohesion to it. It's a relatively new city. It was founded by Peter the Great in 1703 on the site of a captured Swedish fortress. And so the core of the city and all of its streets and many of its buildings were planned all in one go over a relatively brief period of history. And so we get these very wide streets with, not unlike the centre of Paris actually, a consistency, or almost a consistency, in the height of the buildings on either side of the road, the number of stories to each building. And a great many neoclassical facades with baroque features are on show here. I think that Russia is a place that looms large in the Western mind as mysterious, alien, different, a little bit frightening, and perhaps some of that has got to do with the language and the script that it's written in, Cyrillic. Some of the letters are recognisable to us, but others look like a strange sort of parallel universe, upside down or back to front kind of writing. And I've always been quite fascinated by it, really. Shame about this bus in the way. Certainly following the course of the river here, or perhaps this is a canal, is appealing, but I think we might press a little bit further into the interior of the city in this direction before we start heading off on different tangents. Peter the Great, who was the Tsar who founded this city, was very much a Europhile, and at that time in aristocratic circles in Russia it was very much the most sophisticated thing to be able to speak French and to emulate Parisian court culture. We were still nearly a century off from the French Revolution that ruined everything over there. And it would be over 100 years thence until the Russian Revolution. And so this city was very much conceived as an answer to the European capitals further west, to put Russia on the map as a place that the European nobility would take seriously. And in terms of the architecture we have here, I think that the city really can make a claim to measure up. But there's something decidedly not European about the place, and it's difficult to put your finger on exactly what it is, but I think it comes down to street level and the shop windows. Now, we do have shop windows here, and indeed, at first glance, it would be difficult to say that this doesn't look like a normal sort of street scene. But I think that what makes the difference here with ground floor facades of the buildings is that the windows are generally a little bit smaller, a little bit higher than you might expect to see on a European street. And there's a lot more brickwork visible in between the windows, which gives the sides of the buildings a bit of a sense of blankness and impenetrability. Now, these aren't actually perhaps the best examples of this that we can see here on Nevsky Prospect, but perhaps we'll come across some other examples later in our exploration. Now, we've only been traversing one single street here, and granted it is one of the main streets of the city, but I have to say I'm extremely impressed by the amount that there is to see here, the number of incredible buildings and the variety. I mean, on the whole, actually, it is mostly a sort of a neoclassical template that we've got in evidence here. But within that, there are many different colours, varying configurations of windows. Not a great deal of decoration on top. Now, as you may know if you've seen a lot of my other videos on this channel, I'm very, very keen on gables on a facade, whether they are decorative or true gables. And something like this rather boring unbroken line at the top of the building is certainly less appealing than, say, something like this that has a little bit more of a shape to it on top. But it is without a doubt a saturated city. It wouldn't be possible to spend only a day here, I think, and feel as though you'd really got to grips with the place. And it's for that reason that any street view exploration that we undertake here on the Street Aesthete channel is simply going to be inadequate. Maybe another thing that doesn't feel quite European about the place, and this is very much due to its history and how it is a relatively young city, unlike the older capital cities and indeed just the various towns of the rest of Europe, whose street layout evolved organically. A planned city like this, when designed with so many straight lines and geometrical shapes, is necessarily somewhat inorganic in its layout. And here I would say, by the way, is a great example of what I mean about the windows being higher than we might expect to see. This is a McDonald's, by the way. I suspect it is no longer a McDonald's at the present day. And not only that, with regards to the street layout being inorganic, but the width of the streets is not quite on a human scale. One has this sense of the city being built for giants, of it not quite having been designed to be easily traversable. This is very much the sort of city where, if, as I like to do generally on the Street Aesthete channel, I were to stop and examine every building, we would never progress beyond a single block on a single street. I've never been to St. Petersburg, nor have I ever been to Russia for that matter. The closest I've ever been is the Estonian town of Narva, which is right in the east of Estonia, up against the Russian border. But St. Petersburg is definitely somewhere that I would like to visit. Whether that's going to be possible, given current affairs anytime soon, I'm uncertain. And it strikes me that the best way, other than being there in person, of exploring this city in Street View would be to set aside quite a few hours to do it, perhaps in a live stream. You never know, if this channel starts to gain a bit of a following, if there is a willing audience, it might be something that I would consider doing in future. Because in all honesty, every single street that we approach looks as though it would be worth pursuing. Having said that, we come now to some of the larger car infrastructure of the city. But can we get into some coverage perhaps over here? think it would be quite an overwhelming city to visit. St. Petersburg is the northernmost city with over 1 million people living in it. It is the largest city around the Baltic Sea. And it has the world's largest art gallery, or at least the world's largest collection of art in a single building, and that building is this one here, the National Hermitage Museum, the Государственный Эрмитаж. And as you can see, it's absolutely vast. I think it's the sort of museum that you'd have to take several visits to in order to get around. But besides that, it truly is an absolutely stunning building. This is one that I think we will take a bit of time to examine. I think part of what keeps the building so interesting to the eye when viewing its facade is, well, in the first case it's symmetry, which if we can step a bit further back, we'll be able to gain a better appreciation of. But within that macro symmetry, there is a lot of micro symmetry as well. We have the curved window decoration here, with the triangles either side, and that pattern is repeated here in the same place symmetrically on that side. Then we have this sort of smaller fractal echo of the main part of the building here on either side symmetrically, with that same pattern of curved and triangular decoration. Then there's also its very appealing colour palette, the white with this sort of minty teal colour, with little golden highlights here and there, like some sort of humongous wedding cake. And what an incredible square this would be to stand in. Again, feeling as though it wasn't quite built to a human scale, with its vastness. And I think that's where we're going to leave our exploration of St. Petersburg today. In all honesty, I found it a rather difficult city to approach, partly because of how large it is, but also because of how densely packed it is with incredible buildings, the sheer aesthetic cohesion of the place, and the beauty of its building facades. I must admit, find quite emotionally affecting, partly because it's unusual to see such a high concentration of deliberately cultivated beauty, but also because it has this sense of distance, of being remote from human touch. I'm perhaps being naive or overly poetic here, but I feel as one might if they were to encounter a city of angels, to visit heaven in mortal form and find that you didn't belong there, that the edifices of its grand promenade were not made for you ever to enter. And look, I'm by no means saying that the people in this city are angels or anything like that, far from it. But I'm trying to convey the sense that I feel when confronted by how exaggerated it is. In some ways, by its cohesion and its beauty and opulence, it surpasses the Western European cities that it was emulating. But on the whole, there's something about it that fills me with a kind of paranoid dread. One begins to understand how alienated the character Raskolnikov in Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment might have felt living in this city. And that's about as much as I think I've got to say about the place for now. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video with me. Since you've made it this far, why not subscribe? And you'll get to see more street view explorations of noteworthy locations, usually with a bit more architectural analysis and a bit less off-the-cuff philosophizing. If you've enjoyed the music that you hear in this video, then take a look at my first channel, which is where I upload all of my original music.